The turn of the tide for the Jews in the 18th century. It was in the second quarter of the 18th century that things began to improve for the Jewish people in Europe. In 1723, Louis XV of France gave the Jews permission to hold real estate. In the same year, the British Parliament at last acknowledged Jews as British subjects. In 1753, the Jewish Naturalisation Act allowed Jews resident in Britain to become naturalised by application to Parliament. Unfortunately, the public reacted with an enormous outburst of antisemitism, and the bill was repealed in the next sitting of Parliament in 1754. Preachers of the day argued that as God had expelled the Jews from their land, it wasn't right to naturalise them in Britain. Although the act was repealed, it signified the start of a movement which has never since been arrested. This was the period of Moses Mendelssohn, 1729 to 1786, the German Jewish writer and philosopher. His writings and ideas on Jews and the Jewish religion and identity were a central element in the development of the Haskalah, or Jewish Enlightenment, of the 18th and 19th centuries. His works promoted the rights of all people to equal rights and acceptance in society. His most important work was Jerusalem, published in 1783. Its basic tenet was that the state has no right to interfere with the religion of its citizens, Jews included. It was important in that at last the Jews had found a voice and a cause. The general oppression of the Jewish people gradually eased. In 1780, the Emperor Joseph II of Austria was the first to really offer emancipation to his Jewish subjects. He allowed them to take a full part in society and repealed the horrible body tax, which had imposed severe restrictions on what a Jew was allowed to do. In 1788, Louis XVI of France passed a similar edict. Strangely, the Jews were helped by Voltaire, the French Enlightenment writer and philosopher, who actually hated the Jews. His doctrine of the absolute equality of men, without regard to race or creed, inevitably led to greater emancipation for the Jewish people. The United States of America was the first nation to embody this principle in its laws. In fact, it was the American Revolution and the Declaration of Independence in 1776 that provided the greatest guarantee of a long-term hope and a future for the Jews. The famous statement of human rights was itself revolutionary. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In the long term, it was the United States that would become the greatest home and sanctuary for the Jews. In Europe, the French Revolution became the ultimate instrument of change for the Jewish people. As throne after throne crumbled, the chains of oppression fell off the Jewish people. In the terrible massacres that took place in France, the Jews alone commonly escaped harm. The emancipation of the Jews was completed in the French Revolution, and one country after another followed the French example. In the 19th century, the process continued, but it took time. In Britain, evangelical Christianity grew, and attitudes to the Jewish people softened. There were several Acts of Parliament from 1830 onwards, which attempted to ameliorate the plight of the Jews. But it took 10 attempts until finally, in 1858, full equality was conceded. So the stage was set for the return of the Jews to their homeland, the Holy Land. So thank you for listening. If you found this video interesting, you can find more information at prophecy-workshop.com.